Hello there, and welcome to the first lecture of economics. And in this lecture, in this short introductory lecture, we are going to study some of the most basic concepts of economy so that we make up the base and foundation for the rest of the course. Now, we'll be dealing with some very simple and very basic concepts which you may be already knowing, but then we have to cover it, as a compulsion of covering the other topics later. So we start with microeconomics. What is microeconomics? Microeconomics is about individual based decision making process in the economics. Fine. Now, you may take the case of a household. Fine. A household, whatever economic decisions it takes, or whatever the economy that revolves around that household, that will come into the microeconomics. Fine. You can for that purpose take the example of a firm also, a company also, but individually. Fine. So whenever there is a case of individual, let us say household or a company or an entity, see the basic unit or the basic entity in economics is a household. Fine. Firm is comparatively a bigger entity, but then even if it is taken individually, it forms it falls in the microeconomics. Fine. Then as you can guess, microeconomics is not that important when we will study whole of the economics. Yes, there are a few microeconomic concepts which eventually imply to the macroeconomics as well, or rather the macroeconomic, the phenomenons, the phenomena, they are based somewhere on those particular concepts also, but then we don't mention those concepts. Fine, because they are very basic, and yes, they need our understanding, so we'll be doing that also. Fine. Then we come to the macroeconomics. Now macroeconomics, it is obviously an kind of an aggregate, and when we are talking at a national level, for example, then we talk of macroeconomics. It looks into the behavior of economic aggregates. For example, when we talk of GDP, when we talk of GDP growth, when we talk of total saving, when we talk of total investment, etc., then you have the concept of macroeconomics, and this particular exam is all about macroeconomics. Then there is something very important that we are going to discuss. It is basically kind of a setup between the different entities in a nation, whether it be the households, whether it be the firms, whether it be the governments, and whether it be the financial sector. Fine. So this is something which is called as circular flow of income. Now what is circular flow of income? This circular flow of income tells you about the interlinkages and interdependence between different economic sectors. Rather, the economic setup is given by it. Fine. Now we'll try and understand illustratively what it is all about. Then you have to consider a lot of things, but I'll try to make it simple for you. Now we will consider a virtual diagram. Fine. Suppose here you have households, here you have firms, and here you have financial sector. Fine. Financial sector like banks. Fine. We'll consider banks here. We'll not consider this non-banking financial sector. We'll consider banks here for the sake of for the ease of understanding. Fine. Then here you have households, here you have firms, and here you have financial sector. Fine. So households provide to firms, I'm showing with this line, households provide to firms something called as factors of production. Fine. Now a firm has to start its manufacturing, and it has to cater to the public. Then what it basically needs, all that what it needs for production is provided to this firm directly or indirectly by households. Fine. Now households generally provide them what we call as factors of production. Now these include, number one, land. Fine, because an industry will need land for production. Then labor, then capital, and then entrepreneurship. Fine. Now these are the four things that are provided by households to the firms. Fine. And what do firms give them in return? Firms give them something called as factor payments. Fine. Or we call them factor costs, or we call them factor inputs. Fine. So this is a remuneration for the factors of production. What is this? What does this include? It includes some particular payments against the factors of production. Fine. For example, for land you have rent. Fine. Then for labor you have wages. Then for capital you have interest, and for entrepreneurship you have got profit. Fine. So this much is clear. Households are providing factors of production, and firms are giving them back factor payments, factor cost, or factor income. Fine. Now after the production process is complete, firms provide to household goods and services, fine, for which the firm is meant. And what do households give them in return? Households give them in return the money, or rather the expenditure, fine, remuneration, which is here called by a special term, that is PFCE, that is private final consumption expenditure, fine. So this picture is almost complete. Now see, households may be having some saving also, fine, and obviously households have saving, which they save in banks, fine, which they save in this financial sector, and this is the saving which pools together and which the firms take in form of credit, fine. So household saving coming here, and it goes to the industries, it goes to the firms, fine. So this makes up the borrowing by the firms, fine, by the industries. Now industries may also be having some saving, they also pool their saving in the bank, they also save their savings in the bank, and households can take it from there for their use, fine. Now this picture is almost complete. Now we bring in a fourth entity, that is government, here in middle. So on this side you have households, on this side you have firms, here you have financial sector, in the center you have the government, fine. Now what is the government linkage with all these? See, if you consider households, then households provide taxes to the government, fine. Now here we are not talking about one household, remember we are talking about macroeconomics. So households in totality we are talking about, fine. So households provide taxes to the government, and the government provides to households a lot of things, including number one, subsidies, fine. Number second, IE. What is IE? IE is infrastructural expenditure, fine. The infrastructure that government makes up, like the roads, like the bridges, etc., and a lot of other things, fine, that comes under infrastructural expenditure. And what is the third thing that government provides to the households? This is payment for services, PFS, payment for services. The most common example is salary, fine. This is the link between government and household. Now government and firms, what do the firms provide to the government? Again, taxes. What does the government provide to firms? It provides, again, number one, subsidies, number second, infrastructural expenditure, and number third, GFCE, something called as government final consumption expenditure. That is whatever government takes from the firms, then it provides a remuneration in form of something called as GFCE, that is government final consumption expenditure. So what does government provide to the households? It provides subsidies, it provides infrastructural expenditure, then it provides payment for services. And what does the government provide to the firms? It provides subsidies, it provides infrastructure expenditure, then it provides government final consumption expenditure, that is GFCE. Now what is the link between government and financial sector? The link between government and financial sector is that government takes money from the financial sector, government borrows from financial sector, fine, and the government also puts in its surplus in the banks, fine. Then government puts its saving in the financial sector. Now this may be a bit typical, as to say that even does, and especially in India, does even government make some profit? And if it makes profit, why does it borrow so much? You have sometimes you have crisis in the payment of the foreign dues. Then can we say that the government actually saves? Yes, government sometimes saves also, but it isn't to say that that will suffice for the expenditure, or rather even if government saves, it is not necessary that government will put the same money into expenditure. Like for example, when you have to buy a car, you may be having enough money to buy a car, fine, you may be having even more money than that, which generally happens, but then you will not take out that. A general practice goes as, you will not take out the whole of the money and buy a car at once. What you will do is you will take a car loan, fine. So similar is the example here also, fine. So in this process of saving and expenditure, we say that when it comes to the borrowings, fine, then firms are the largest borrowers, fine, followed by the government, and then at the number third is household. So in terms of borrowing, in the decreasing order, you have firms, then you have government, then you have households, fine. Now when it comes to savings, then the leaders are the households, fine. Households, saving, then firms, and then government. So in case of savings, it is household, firms, and government. Now we are having some more terms to discuss. Number one is entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship generally refers to the risk-taking ability. Fine, if there's an entrepreneur and he will go ahead with a decision of conducting all the process of production, and he will preside over them, and he will be the person who will be at the center of affairs, and the thing that is very necessary is the risk taking ability. Fine. Then you talk about real economy and nominal economy. What is real economy? Real economy is kind of a qualitative concept. Fine. Now it implies processes going on without prices. Now you may get confused, how can any economic process go on without prices? Fine. Or without money. See, the basic concept which is there. Fine. Let us say the basic concept of transaction, or the basic concept of give and take. Fine, we can discuss it as a concept. Fine, without bringing in the calculations and how much has been transacted. Fine, so this basic concept, or rather you can say the qualitative base of any economic transaction happening, that is something called as the real economy working behind. Fine. Then the best example I can give right now is the flow chart that we discussed. We discussed this flow chart, and we nowhere mentioned any amount. Fine. I told you that households will be providing factors of production to the firms, and in return firms will provide them factor income. Fine, but we never mentioned how much. Fine. So this qualitative concept is so this quantitative concept, or rather the monetary value, is not there, and rather we have the qualitative concept of transactions. Fine. So this is the basic the work engine of economy. Fine. So this forms the interior core of all the processes going on in the economy. Fine. Then you have nominal economy. Obviously, when the role of money is emphasized, or rather when the processes are talked about in monetary terms, then we call it nominal economy. Fine. This is obviously very important. For example, let us say you have to calculate the GDP. Fine. How will you do it? You cannot just lay emphasis on the processes going on. No, you have to exactly have the exact calculations of the GDP, and then you have to give an actual figure. Fine. So here this nominal economy comes into play. But what we realize is that behind every nominal concept, fine, there is the actual work engine on in the background is the real economy. So you have this real economy working in form of an engine behind you, and on the facet of it you have got this nominal economy. Fine. So just to conclude, the 3 points that we are going to remember from this short discussion is that real economy is quantitative based and nominal economy is monetary based. Then behind every nominal economic concept there is the real economic concept in the process going on. Fine. Then these two should always be ideally correlated. Fine. If there is no correlation between them, then definitely there will be some anomalies. Fine. I'll give you an example that if let us say nominal GDP is greater than the real GDP, fine, then a simple the simple conclusion you will make is that it is because of inflation. There is inflation. Fine. So things like that, for being ideal, the nominal and the real economy should go hand in hand. Fine. Then what is investment? See, if you talk about capital, basically what is capital? Capital is something, it is kind of an asset. Fine. Which will give you returns later. Fine. So it is generally linked to long term. Fine. Long term investment. Fine. So capital is it is not something shortly that will give you return once. Once you bring in the capital, then this capital is something which is linked to the long term growth. Fine. Then if you add assets into capital, fine, now before that this capital is of two types. Number one is physical capital, number second is human capital, the intangible capital. Now when more assets are added into the capital, that forms something which you call as investment. Fine. Now you increase your capital, then it is called as investment. Fine. Now it is important because investment determines the long term economic growth. Fine. Like we talk about long term GDP. So this concept of, let us say, investment it is linked to this long-term growth, fine, because obviously we have capital, and enhancement of capital, addition of assets into capital obviously will enhance the long-term growth, fine. Then the more we save, the more we can invest, fine, because it is only the saving of households that is there in the banks, which the firms take up in form of capital, and the households are paid interest in return. Now there is one term that is left, that is transfer payments. And what is transfer payment? Transfer payment is generally one-sided transaction, fine, or rather you can say that a payment without any reciprocal return. Now you may get confused, but there is nothing to get confused. We generally come across many kind of payments which are actually transfer payments. Let us say from government side. From government side, subsidy is something which is a transfer payment, because when government provides subsidy on something, it doesn't demand any return, fine. Now and from the people side, taxes are a kind of transfer payment. Now you may think that it is because of the taxes that government does work for us, it is because of the taxes the government builds roads, fine, government does infrastructural expenditure, and it is based on, yes, it is based on tax, but tax is a source of income for government, fine. Now it is not necessary that if I am paying tax, I will necessarily get a commodity from government which is of my use, fine. I cannot expect it. For example, government is building a bridge in in any part of the country. Now suppose the money I'm giving, it is used for that particular bridge, fine. Now I may not come across that bridge throughout my life, I may not use that bridge, fine. Or rather, if government is paying subsidy, see, subsidy is generally paid to the poor sections of society, fine, those sections who generally do not pay taxes, fine. So you cannot say that yes, as a whole, as economy as a whole, you can say that it is because of the taxes that government is carrying out its expenditure, fine, that is okay. But to be very specific, why are we calling it one-sided payment? Because let us say I'm paying taxes, fine. Now it is not necessary that government will ensure that yes, in return to this particular amount that you are paying me this year, you will definitely get something from my side. That is not the case, fine. It will be used for national good, but then this cannot be used specifically for me, and I cannot expect from the government a remuneration, fine, rather a return, fine. Similar is the case with subsidies, fine. Subsidy is given to something, let us say on a subsidy is given through a scheme, or rather in any means. Let us say agricultural subsidy, let us say subsidy on electricity to the farmers, for example, fine. Now government is not taking anything back from them, fine. They may or may not be able to pay taxes, and when I use the word tax here, it means direct taxes. I'm not talking about indirect taxes, because obviously the prices are inclusive of those, and everybody has to pay them knowingly or unknowingly. But then the transfer payments, yes, they are a part of our system, and the best two examples is subsidies and taxes, fine. Then you talk about closed economy and open economy. What is closed economy? Closed economy, or inward looking economy, is when when we are looking inside a country and the interlinkages of the economic sectors there, and fine. Now the foreign element is missing here, fine. If you talk about the economic setup within a country, and you talk about the interlinkages between different economic sectors within a country, kind of when we talked about that circular flow of economy diagram, fine, that is also an example of the closed economy, fine. Now when these interlinkages, that is the different sectors, the different economic sectors within a country, fine, this setup plus the linkages with the foreign sectors, fine, when the word foreign comes in, it becomes an open economy, fine. Then these foreign links can be with, let us say, foreign firms, foreign banks, foreign households, or any other financial sector of foreign origin, fine. So what is the example? The best example is import and export, fine. This is the most basic example that you can give, fine. So I hope these small terms are clear. Now in the next lecture we'll be studying some macroeconomic concepts, and therein we will take large topics per lecture, fine. Thank you so much.